1,000 feet above the night-lit sprawl of New York, the most famous voice in boxing was forced into silence, not by a punch, but by a cabin full of strangers itching to see Muhammad Ali flinch. What happens when the Louisville lip has nowhere to float like a butterfly, and the sting finds him first? The Boeing 707 bound for Kinshasa trembled against a stubborn headwind, yet the real turbulence brewed in row 2A. Muhammad Ali, champion reclaimed, draft resister, America's loudest conscience, had taken his seat wearing a beige three-piece and an expression equal parts boredom and restless calculation. The year was 1974, the fight of the decade against George Foreman only weeks away, and Ali had promised every journalist from Harlem to Hanoi that he would beat the younger man like he stole my bicycle. Now, high above the Atlantic, there was no microphone, no ring, just recycled air and 70-odd passengers deciding what they thought of him. Across the aisle, Howard Cosell pressed a fedora into the overhead bin, cocked his eyebrow, and whispered to trainer Angelo Dundee, "You can feel the static in here, Ange. They want the champ to trip on his own tongue." Dundee grunted, slid an envelope of scouting notes beneath his seat, and gave Ali a conspiratorial wink. "Nothing new, champ. Just another crowd to outdance." Ali exhaled. He was used to booze, to headlines calling him an unpatriotic loudmouth, to politicians sniping that Cassius Clay had boxed himself into moral irrelevance. But there was a special edge tonight. News of Foreman's annihilation of Ken Norton still echoed through sports pages, and some passengers muttered that Ali was flying toward humiliation. A middle-aged businessman, later identified by Cosell as Wall Street broker Ivan Boesky, leaned forward and stage-whispered, "Should have stayed in exile, loudmouth. You won't talk your way out of Foreman's jab." His breath carried the sour confidence of 2 martinis and a cultural vendetta. Ali flashed the grin that lit arenas. "Brother, the only exile I know is where folks hide from my poetry." He spoke softly, yet everyone nearby heard. A ripple of nervous laughter, a sharper ripple of disdain. From 3 rows back, a woman in pearls hissed, "Arrogant draft dodger!" Her husband, a retired Marine colonel named Charles Beckwith, folded his arms like he expected Ali's rhetoric to ignite the seat fabric. Flight deck door clicked open. Captain Ernest Gann, silver-haired veteran who'd ferried troops in Korea, glanced down the aisle and spotted Ali. Something stony settled in his gaze. He didn't speak, only nodded to the lead steward, a wiry man named Peter Lawford. Yes, Sinatra's old Rat Pack friend moonlighting between acting gigs. Lawford pursed his lips and approached 2A. "Good evening, Mr. Ali. Captain requests you stow that briefcase fully under the seat, sir." The briefcase already was. Ali obliged with exaggerated care, catching Lawford's eye long enough to register the unspoken. "You're no hero here." 10 minutes later, during dinner service, turbulence flicked the plane like a finger. Lawford steadied himself, then, accidentally, dumped a ladle of steaming coffee across Ali's tray. Gasps spatter on the champ's cuff. Before Dundee could bark, Ali raised a palm. "Brother, accidents happen. A champ stays cool." His tone calm, but his jaw flexed. Cosell fished a handkerchief, dabbed Ali's sleeve, and murmured, "They're baiting you. Don't swing." Ali didn't respond. He was listening to the plane itself, the metal groan, the whispered judgment, the engine note that reminded him of roaring crowds. He felt a memory stir. 1967, stripped of belts for saying no to Vietnam, standing before white judges calling him coward. Same eyes now, different courtroom. An hour passed. Cabin lights dimmed. Somewhere near the Azores, the colonel rose, strode to Ali's row, and planted a palm on the seat back. "I fought for this flag while you yapped, Clay. You don't deserve to sit among men who bled." His voice bore the clipped menace of command. Ali looked up, eyelids half-masked. "Colonel, I never bled in your war, true. I bled in rings so men like you could afford a ticket to hate me." Soft words, sharper than glass. The colonel's fist twitched. Dundee tensed. Cosell cleared his throat. "Colonel, the champ has a point, and I, Howard Cosell, attest." "Shut it, pencil neck," Beckwith snapped. At that moment, Captain Gann's voice crackled over the intercom, cold as a referee's warning. "Folks, little patch of choppy air ahead. Remain seated. Some of us know how to hold our ground." The phrase hung ominously. Ali felt the plane dip, but it was Gann's contempt that jolted harder. Beckwith started to speak again, but Ali beat him to it, leaning forward, voice low, controlled. "Colonel, you got medals. I got scars. Both prove we're alive. Sit down before the plane reminds us how equal we are at 33,000 feet." Something in the reigning cadence, half poet, half thunder, made even the Marine hesitate. He returned to his seat, pride bruised. Lawford hustled by, cheeks flushed, whispering into the galley phone. Minutes later, 2 uniformed flight engineers emerged, glancing at Ali as if measuring risk. Dundee's knuckles whitened on the armrest. Cosell muttered a litany. "This is broadcasting gold, but Lord, keep the champ cool." Ali closed his eyes, folded his hands, and began to hum verses of the Quran under his breath, a gentle current against the storm of eyes. He wasn't praying for safety. He was building an inner ring, a rope-a-dope of silence where insults punched themselves out. When he opened his eyes again, the cabin seemed smaller, like an arena shrinking before the bell. There would be 9 more rounds before landing, 9 more unseen judges waiting to score composure against provocation. And Ali, ever the strategist, knew the first round was his. He'd stayed on his stool, let rage swing wild, and kept the story his own. Outside, the Atlantic night stretched black and vast, watching, listening, waiting to see if the greatest could still float when the air itself turned hostile. The jet knifed deeper into the moonless corridor between continents, and the hum of its turbines wove itself around every thought in row 2A. Muhammad Ali stared at the dark window until his reflection blurred into static, half expecting to glimpse Foreman's granite face ghosting in the glass. Across the aisle, Howard Cosell had dozed off, lips parted, necktie askew. Even unconscious, he looked like he was lecturing a camera. Yet Ali felt no envy for the silence Cosell enjoyed. The champ's own mind rang louder than any press conference. Old Louisville alleys, sermons of Elijah Muhammad, the draft board courtroom where the judge's gavel echoed like a knockout bell, all supercut together by the insomnia of altitude. Somewhere aft, a stewardess dropped a metal tray. The clang jolted a young soldier, Private First Class Jeffrey Dahmer on emergency leave, who snapped upright, spilling bourbon onto his fatigues. Eyes glassy, he muttered, "Charleston's burning," though no one nearby understood the reference. The spill crept underfoot toward a toddler, whose mother, folk singer Joan Baez, incognito beneath a paisley scarf, lifted the child with practiced gentleness. Baez caught Ali's gaze across the dim aisle. Rebel recognized rebel, and she offered a small salute. 2 fingers to her brow, a gesture stolen from peace marches and prison vigils. Ali smiled, mouthed, "Stay strong, sister," and returned to his inner tapes. He replayed Foreman's knockout of Frazier in slow motion. That uppercut like a telephone pole, that moment Joe's mouthpiece flew into orbit. Fear tasted metallic at 33,000 feet, different from ringside adrenaline, more like biting a battery. Ali tasted it and silently thanked it. Fear, he'd learned, was honest company. Seatbelt sign dinged off. Passengers rose for the lavatory queue, their shapes ghost white in the cabin glow. Colonel Beckwith lingered near bulkhead, arms crossed, as if supervising a platoon. From his pocket he withdrew a worn pack of Lucky Strikes, but the no-smoking light flashed. His jaw flexed, craving defiance. He slid the cigarette behind his ear and stalked toward the galley. Angelo Dundee leaned closer to Ali. "Champ, I ain't your conscience, but staying zipped forever ain't strategy. They see a muzzle, they smell blood." Ali's reply was almost a whisper. "The rope gains slack before it whips. Let them lean in." His eyes drifted forward, tracking the colonel, who now loomed outside the cockpit door, exchanging terse syllables with Captain Gann. No words carried back, but Gann's raised brow and Beckwith's clenched fist wrote a clear subtitle: "Eject the loudmouth before he infects morale." 10 seconds later, an authoritative ding summoned Lawford to the cockpit. Doors slid shut, the intercom crackled, shut off, crackled again, then settled into silence. Heavy enough to smother conversation. Passengers traded looks. Ali felt the plane's nose pitch subtly upward. Not danger, merely the captain flexing his command, reminding everyone that ultimate authority sat behind a locked door. Ali unbuckled and stood. Height made him visible over seats, a moving marquee. Murmurs rippled. There he goes. The show begins. He walked aisleward, pausing at Baez's row. "You the songbird of Selma?" he asked softly. She nodded. "Then sing, sister. Fill this tin can with something righteous." Baez's smile was tired but bright. She lifted her child onto her lap and began humming "We Shall Overcome" under her breath, quiet as contraband, defiant as steel. Passengers reacted like cells to voltage. A French journalist, Simone de Beauvoir's protégé Jean Malaquais, closed his notebook and joined the humming. A pair of Nigerian students harmonized on the refrain. The colonel at the galley stiffened. This was not the silence he had ordered. Ali reached the lavatory line, waited behind Dahmer, whose hands shook so badly the bourbon bottle clinked against his belt buckle. "Easy, soldier," Ali said. Dahmer blinked, uncertain whether to salute. "They said you hate America," he slurred. Ali laid a gentle hand on the man's shoulder. "I love America's promise, not always her memory. Big difference." The words landed like balm. Dahmer's tremor eased a fraction. Lavatory freed up. Dahmer stumbled in. Ali turned and saw Captain Gann emerging from the cockpit, Beckwith shadowing him like a bailiff. Gann's announcement lacked microphone, yet every ear caught it. "Mr. Ali, a word." The hum of rebellion dissolved. Baez's song faltered into breath. Ali matched the captain's gaze. "Speak here, Captain. My ears work fine." Gann's jaw squared. "You're disrupting order. People feel unsafe around you." Howard Cosell, half awake, barked, "Captain, the only danger here is prejudice at altitude." Cosell's voice, though raspy, carried the ring of broadcast truth. A smattering of applause, nervous, quickly stifled. Gann ignored it. "Mr. Ali, return to your seat. Should any further disturbance follow, I'll have no choice but to restrain you according to air security protocol." Beckwith's grin flickered like a blade catching hallway light. Ali inhaled long, slow. He could picture headlines. "Champ shackled in mid-air melee." But he pictured something else, too. Zaire's night sky split by stadium floodlights, 31 rounds of strategy squeezed into 8. He had no use for shackles weeks before the real ropes. "I'll sit, Captain," he said, voice smooth as the silk lining of his suit. "But remember, order without justice is just quiet cruelty." He pivoted, sauntered back down the aisle, each step pulsed with theatrical calm, the kind fighters cultivate to walk through booing arenas. Halfway to his row, he stopped beside the colonel's empty seat. He picked up the Lucky Strike still tucked behind Beckwith's folded jacket and held it aloft. "Colonel," he called, loud enough for the plane to hear, "you forgot your crutch." Laughter erupted, brief, liberated, before dying under the captain's glare. Ali placed the cigarette on the armrest like a calling card and resumed his seat. The engines droned on, but beneath that steady note, new harmonics bloomed. Baez's soft chorus began again, joined by more voices, cautious yet swelling. Something had shifted. The cabin had become a micro-arena where Ali's greatest weapon, contagious conviction, bounced off every fuselage rivet. And as the song found its stride, Muhammad Ali closed his eyes and listened, letting the rhythm lace itself around his nerves, letting every bar of melody transmute fear into something sharper than courage. Anticipation. Because the fight of the decade didn't start with the bell in Kinshasa, it started here, in recycled air, at 33,000 feet, with a simple hymn louder than any jet. The hymn threaded along the fuselage until it seemed the 707 itself was vibrating with civil rights gospel. Yet songs, like rounds, must end. When the hum dwindled, a hush clung to the cabin, pregnant with the question every watcher asks a boxer between bells. What now? Out of the lull rose the scratch of a match. Colonel Beckwith returned to his seat, struck the lucky strike Ali had taunted him with. The flare painted his face sulfur orange before the no-smoking light glared red. A stewardess hurried forward, 21-year-old future supermodel Iman Abdul-Majid, on summer break from Nairobi University, her voice polite but iron-lined. "Sir, you'll need to extinguish that." Beckwith exhaled a plume of rebellious smoke, eyes locked on Ali as if daring him to object. Ali did not. Instead, he addressed the colonel across the aisle, voice carrying just enough to reach the cockpit door. "Smell that, Howard? Napalm on a stick." Cosell, now fully awake, flipped open his notebook and murmured, "And the tension thickens, ladies and gentlemen." But the real ignition came from row 5C, where Watergate burglar G. Gordon Liddy, out on appeal, leaned into the aisle and laughed, sharp and theatrical. "Ali, you of all people whining about napalm. You sat this country's war out. Some of us did the dirty work you poets evade." The insult, flung like a left hook, drew a collective intake of breath. Even the engines seemed to idle lower. Ali turned his head slowly, eyes finding Liddy's with surgical precision. A faint smile curved his lips, the smile trainers hate, the one that means the mind is loading ammunition. Yet before Ali could speak, a high-pitched ding sounded, and the overhead speakers popped alive. "This is Captain Gann. Due to a medical incident, we'll be diverting to Santa Maria in the Azores. Flight crew, prepare cabin." The announcement struck like a surprise standing 8 count. Medical incident? Heads swiveled. 2 rows up, Private Dahmer was convulsing. Bourbon bottle shattered at his feet, shards glittering like ice. Foam rimmed his lips. Joan Baez cried out, cradling her child away from the glass. Angelo Dundee sprang up, instincts honed from patching fighters mid-bout, and knelt beside the soldier. Ali followed, crouching opposite, huge hands surprisingly gentle as he steadied the man's twitching shoulders. "Epileptic or poison," Dundee muttered. Baez produced a medicinal kit, but Colonel Beckwith barged across, knocking her purse aside. "Back off, military protocol." He reached for Dahmer's dog tags, perhaps to establish rank, perhaps to assert ownership. Ali's hand intercepted the colonel's wrist, steel meeting steel. The grip froze Beckwith mid-motion. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Ali spoke, voice low but carrying. "Colonel, this man's not your battlefield. Let the doc work." The words were calm, the stare was not. Something old and undefeated flashed there, the fire that melted Liston and withered Fraser. Beckwith's face flushed crimson. He jerked free but stepped back. Dundee cleared Dahmer's airway with a swab torn from Baez's scarf. The stewardess Iman handed over an oxygen bottle. Liddy hovered like a vulture, taking notes for future crimes. Cosell narrated under his breath. The champ now in the unfamiliar role of medic, remarkable composure. Ali ignored him, focusing on the soldier's eyes. "Hey, brother, ride it out. You're still here. Breathe with me." He breathed slow, demonstrative, as he had learned to do between punishing rounds. Gradually the convulsions eased. Dahmer's eyes fluttered, comprehension foggy. The cabin exhaled as one organism. Somewhere a woman sobbed relief. Captain Gann's voice returned. "Cabin secure. We are committed to descent." The plane banked left, engines throttling back. Only then did Ali stand, knees popping. He surveyed the passengers, every eye on him, but now the glare had shifted. Suspicion to reluctant respect, disdain to complicated gratitude. Even Beckwith looked away first. Iman passed Ali a damp towel for his bloody knuckles. He hadn't noticed the glass had nicked him. "Thank you, champion," she said, accent lilted with East African warmth. He smiled, the famous wattage dimmed but authentic. "Thank you, sister, for flying higher than this bird." At 18,000 feet, the seatbelt light flashed again. Passengers buckled with unusual obedience, as if turbulence now resided in human hearts rather than clouds. Ali returned to 2A, Cosell beside him scribbling furiously. "Mohammed," he whispered, "do you realize you just saved a soldier who might have shot at you in 67? Ali closed his eyes, head resting against the hummed rattle of the fuselage. "Howard, in the ring every punch is personal, but after the bell nothing is. That's what they don't understand." Cosell pondered, twirled his pen. "This could change the narrative going into Zaire." "No," Ali murmured, already half dreaming of jungle heat and Foreman's sledgehammers. Foreman's gloves don't read newspapers. Minutes later, the landing gear groaned into place. Outside the window, Santa Maria's runway lights glittered like a string of low stars flung across the Atlantic. Inside, the cabin felt wired, unstable, an arena crowd after a premature stoppage. Captain Gann broke the silence. "Mr. Ali, after we land, Portuguese security will board. For everyone's safety, remain seated until contacted." His voice suggested the request was less filial than conditional. Ali lifted one eyelid, saw Beckwith touch the holster beneath his jacket, saw Liddy tuck a spiral notebook into his waistband like contraband, saw Iman cradle an oxygen mask over Dahmer's still pale face. The whole tableau froze in his mind, a still photograph titled, "The World at 34,000 Feet, Waiting to Decide Who Its Villain Is." As the wheels screamed onto asphalt and the thrust reversers roared, Ali felt a strange calm. He was descending into a liminal night, on an island he'd never planned to see, surrounded by enemies, allies, and the undecided, exactly the audience a showman needs. And deep in his chest, beneath the fatigue and the dried blood, something fierce and familiar coiled tighter. The certain knowledge that every detour, every delay, was just another round, and the bell had not yet rung. The cabin door cracked open, and Atlantic mist rolled in, smelling of salt, kerosene, and something faintly metallic, like the tang that rides the edge of a fight. Two uniformed men stepped through first. Policia de Segurança Pública, Inspector José Manuel, epaulettes still stitched with the faded crest of Portugal's toppled dictatorship, and U.S. Air Force liaison, Major John Paul Vann, his Vietnam-earned ribbons glinting under the fluorescence. Behind them hovered a paramedic crew wheeling a gurney for Private Dahmer, whose breathing hissed through an oxygen mask. Inspector Manuel's eyes swept the cabin until they landed on Ali with the slow satisfaction of a customs dog finding contraband. "Senor Muhammad Ali, you will disembark for questioning," he said in Oxford-tinged English that carried the cold click of handcuffs even without the metal. Beckwith grinned, Liddy leaned forward like a man betting big on roulette. Cosell half rose. "Inspector, your information is incomplete. There's been no crime." Manuel didn't look at him. "Disorder in international airspace is subject to inspection. The Boxer comes now." Ali unbuckled, rose to his full 6'3", and fixed Manuel with the same curious tilt he saved for referees, explaining rules he already knew. "Inspector, I need to be in Zaire teaching George Foreman footwork. You plan on making me late?" Manuel's reply was a thin smile. "Just thoroughness, senor. The Azores are neutral ground. No butterflies, no bees, only facts." The phrase stung sharper than any slur, a bureaucrat's way of clipping wings. As Ali stepped into the aisle, Beckwith stage whispered, "About time somebody grounded that motor mouth." The words aimed to wound like a cheap body shot. Ali walked through them without a flinch, but Cosell caught the flicker in his eyes, a promise, not a bruise. The stairway down to tarmac breathed cold Atlantic wind against Ali's sweat-damp collar. Sodium lights cast the scene in prison yard yellow. The 707 crouched like a wounded gull. A Portuguese medical van idled, back doors yawning for Dahmer. Joan Baez followed the stretcher, humming a lullaby, her scarf now an impromptu tourniquet on the soldier's wrist. Ali touched her elbow. "Keep singing, sister. Sound travels farther at sea." She nodded, tears bright in the glow. Inside the squat terminal building, plaster still bore bullet pocks from last spring's Carnation Revolution. Fluorescent tubes buzzed overhead while Manuel led Ali to a desk cluttered with customs forms. A lone reporter, Peter Arnett of the Associated Press, materialized with a Nikon, shutter popping like distant popcorn. Ali flashed the reflex grin he used to sell tickets, then let it fade to something sterner. This was no way in. Major Van cleared his throat. "Champ, we just want statements about the disturbance. Quick and clean." His Texas drawl softened the threat, but not the hierarchy behind it. Manuel produced a form. "Reason for conflict." Ali folded his hands, knuckles still raw. "Reason. Fear at high altitude, Inspector. People think loud words are bullets." Manuel's pen paused. "Were you the aggressor?" "Words don't bruise, my friend, unless the heart is thin." The inspector's brow twitched. Philosophy wasn't on the checklist. Before he could retort, the terminal door clanged. Colonel Beckwith strode in, trailed by G. Gordon Liddy, both armed with righteous indignation. "Officer," Beckwith barked, "this man threatened me physically, impeded a federal officer, and compromised flight safety." Ali chuckled, low, like a bass drum warming up. "Colonel, the only thing I compromised was your cigarette." Liddy waved his notebook. "Protocol demands detainment. The draft-dodging agitator endangered. Enough." Manuel's voice cracked like dry wood. "The Boxer cooperates. The rest wait outside." Beckwith's jaw tightened. Vietnam discipline told him never to retreat, but Van gently intercepted. "Easy, Colonel. Let the locals handle it." They withdrew, muttering. As the door slammed, Ali caught Liddy's parting hiss. "Foreman's gonna turn you into fertilizer." The insult hung in the stale air, ugly and intimate. Manuel watched Ali's face, perhaps hoping for combustion. Instead, Ali smiled again. Slow. "Inspector, in boxing we call men like that sparring partners. Loud, useful, and forgettable." A mosquito drone of propellers passed overhead, U.S. Navy Orion on anti-submarine patrol, reminding everyone the Cold War never slept, not even over mid-Atlantic rocks. Manuel rubbed his temples, signed the final line, stamped Ali's passport with an audible thud. "Boa viagem. The medical team says your soldier survives. Your aircraft, however, is grounded until sunrise for inspection." The clock on the wall sputtered at 2:47 a.m. local. Sunrise was 4 hours away. Cosell, now admitted to the room, groaned. Muhammad, Kinshasa press events start in 48 hours. This delay. Ali placed a calm hand on Cosell's shoulder. Howard, time's just roadwork for the soul. But inside, adrenaline pricked. Foreman waited, and every hour lost felt like a skipped round on the heavy bag. The airline arranged cots in the terminal's cargo bay. Concrete floor, smell of diesel and fish. Iman guided passengers to makeshift rows. Joan Baez rocked Dahmer's head in her lap, singing Joe Hill so softly only insomnia could catch it. Beckwith paced like a tiger behind bars, and Liddy scribbled notes as if preparing a congressional hearing on gravity. Ali found an empty corner near a stack of luggage crates stamped PANAM. He unzipped his carry-on, retrieving a jump rope and a worn copy of the autobiography of Malcolm X. Cosell raised an eyebrow. Training, Ali winked. Shadow don't ask for daylight. He began to skip, rope whisking, feet barely kissing concrete, rhythm steady as a ticking bomb. The slaps echoed through the cavernous bay, every tap a reminder of Zaire, of camera flashes, of Foreman's sledgehammer fists. Passengers watched, some annoyed, some mesmerized. Even Beckwith halted mid-pace, hypnotized against his will. With each minute, Ali's pulse settled into a meditative cadence, sweat darkening the beige suit until it clung like a second skin. In his mind, he counted. Step for every headline calling him coward. Wrist flick for every FBI file door slammed. Knee lift for every slur spat tonight. The rope became a pendulum scything doubt. After 10 minutes, he stopped, breath controlled, eyes scanning the room. Silence. Then, unexpectedly, a slow clap from Inspector Manuel, still at his desk. It spread. First Iman, then the Nigerian students, then Baez with tears on her cheeks, until even some who'd cursed him hours before added reluctant palms to the echo. Beckwith folded his arms. Liddy rolled his eyes. But the sound grew, a raw, unpolished ovation bouncing off cargo pallets and tin vents. Ali bowed, not flamboyant, just enough. He wiped sweat with his jacket sleeve, returned the rope to his bag, and sat cross-legged on the cold floor. From somewhere a transistor radio crackled to life, local station piping in Cape Verdean Morna. The melody lulled the clapping into hush. Howard Cosell set his notebook aside, crouched next to the champ. Muhammad, you realize you just turned a detention hall into Madison Square Garden. Ali leaned back against the crate, eyes half closed. Howard, truth is, every room's a ring. Just depends who hears the bell. Outside, the Atlantic wind clawed at corrugated walls, but inside, for the first time all night, the air felt warmer than the fight still to come. A gray-green dawn seeped through the cargo bay skylights, and the passengers stirred to the clank of service carts and the oily aroma of Portuguese coffee. Muhammad Ali lay awake long before the first kettle hissed. He had spent the last hour tracing invisible combinations in the air, jab, cross, shuffle, letting muscle memory prime what the mind still fought to believe. Foreman was only days away. Inspector Jose Manuel re-entered, trenchcoat draped over one arm, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Your aircraft failed a hydraulic test, he announced to the room. Replacement part arrives from Lisbon at noon. Another delay. A groan rolled across the cots like a low wave. Colonel Beckwith spat an oath about Iberian efficiency. Liddy snapped shut a briefcase with theatrical disgust, and Cosell muttered, "The gods of boxing love their drama." Ali rose, stretching until vertebrae clicked like brass knuckles. He caught Manuel's glance and raised an eyebrow. "Noon gives me 7 more hours of road work, Inspector. You sure you want that?" Manuel chuckled despite himself, then grew official once more. "There is an oceanfront promenade outside security." If you leave the terminal, you sign here. Police escort mandatory. Ali signed without hesitation, added a looping autograph beneath the bureaucratic scrawl, and turned to the room. Anybody need fresh air? Silence at first. Then, unexpectedly, Joan Baez stood, baby in one arm, guitar slung over the other. I can trade exile for sunrise. Private Dahmer, pale but upright, nodded timidly. Beckwith rolled his eyes. Group therapy on the beach. Perfect. Minutes later, a small procession filed past customs. Ali, Baez, Dahmer, Iman the stewardess, Cosell clutching his recorder, and 2 local officers trailing like uncertain chaperones. Atlantic wind hit them sharp, snarling Baez's hair, whipping Ali's collar. Foam crashed against black volcanic rock. Gulls circled, their cries the only applause on this impromptu stage. Ali jogged the promenade's length, shoes slapping damp stones, each stride punctuated by the hiss of Cosell's cassette rolling. Baez followed at strolling pace, coaxing quiet chords from the guitar. The melody floated behind Ali like a ribbon in slipstream. Dahmer trudged between, hands shoved in jacket pockets, eyes on the surf, as if trying to fix the image in memory, stronger than whatever seizures had shown him. Halfway back, Ali slowed, letting the group gather. He pointed seaward. Look at that water, soldier. It never tires of punching the shore. Same hit, all day, every day. Yet the rocks still stand. You know why? Dahmer shrugged, breath fogging, because the rocks roll with it. No, Ali grinned, sweat beading his brow, because the rocks remember they're rocks. They don't start thinking they're waves just to fit in. The line sounded simple, but Dahmer's shoulders loosened, a hint of laugh escaped him. Baez smiled over the guitar neck, strumming a brighter cadence. A Land Rover skidded onto the promenade, tires crunching pumice. Out stepped Don King, hair haloed taller than ever, paisley shirt unbuttoned to mid-chest, gold crucifix flashing. Champs, he boomed, arms wide. Pan Am rang me at dawn, said the greatest was grounded in the middle of nowhere. Figures destiny would park you on a rock so the world could catch its breath. Ali wiped sweat, eyed the promoter. Don, you hiring angels for all this miracle talk? King grinned. I come bearing breakfast and publicity. Same thing for you. Portuguese TV wants a seaside interview. They're already wiring mics. Cosell bristled. Don, the man needs rest, not another circus. King waved him off. Howard, rest is for Sunday school. We're rewriting scripture. Besides, locals love underdogs. Word's out. Foreman is invincible. We need these cameras showing Ali alive, kicking, smelling Atlantic breeze like Victory Cologne. Ali considered, then nodded. Fine, but we cut it after 10 minutes. Foreman's the mountain, I'm the climber, and that's the headline. Within minutes, a skinny RTP cameraman arrived, threading cable over basalt boulders. While Tex clipped lav mics to Ali's soaked lapel, King whispered, Give 'em that Louisville Lightning. Confidence sells quicker than fish at dawn. The red tally light blinked. Interviewer Inez de Medeiros asked in careful English, Mr. Ali, people say George Foreman hits harder than any boxer alive. Some say you are past your prime. The pause before past carried knives. Ali leaned toward the lens, brown eyes blazing. Sister, a clock with a loud tick don't run out of seconds. It just reminds folks time is moving. Foreman hears my tick, and it scares him. He jabbed the air. He's young thunder, I'm old lightning. Thunder makes noise, lightning makes damage. Behind the crew, Beckwith and Liddy had appeared, smoking under no fumar signs, snickering. Liddy cupped a hand like a megaphone. Talk's cheap, draft dodger. Ali's head snapped their way. Camera still rolling, he called back, and freedom's expensive. You paid with your silence. The RTP producer signaled cut, delighted by the spark. Interview wrapped, Ali jogged a victory lap. Baez finished a cascading chord, and the entourage headed indoors. At the security door, Beckwith blocked the path. "I want separate seating when we reboard," he told the Portuguese guard. "Can't share space with men who disgrace the uniform." Ali stepped nose to nose, breathing calm. "Colonel, on that airplane nobody's uniform mattered, only the human bleeding. Remember?" Beckwith's jaw tightened, but something in the recollection, Dahmer's seizure, Ali's steady hands, dulled the edge. He muttered a slur under his breath, yet backed away. Inside, news of the beach broadcast had spread. Passengers clustered around a terminal TV, watching delayed footage. Ali framed by crashing surf, eyes firelit, words rolling like gospel. Even those who doubted him felt a pull, the gravitational charisma that filled stadiums and courtrooms alike. Iman squeezed Ali's arm. "You turned 7 lost hours into legend, champ." Ali exhaled, suddenly weary. "Sister, legends just sweat, plus witnesses." He glanced at the wall clock, 8:59, 3 hours until the part from Lisbon, 15 hours until the Congo equator, countless hours until the bell. Plenty of rounds left, and everyone mattered. He closed his eyes a moment, hearing again the Atlantic's relentless jab, 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 carving stone by remembering it is stone, and in that simple repetition found resolve sharper than any final round roar. Night fell over Kinshasa like a velvet hammer, thudding heat against every corrugated roof, and Muhammad Ali stood alone under the yellow bulbs strung around the outdoor ring at the Intercontinental compound, wrapping his fists slower than usual. 12 hours earlier he'd landed, sun-dazed, jet-lagged, still tasting Atlantic salt. Yet the drums outside the hotel pulsed with a promise none of the delays could blunt. In 6 nights, the whole world would watch thunder collide with lightning. He could sense Foreman's camp less than a mile away at Ensel, a tremor in the damp air, as though each of Big George's punches reverberated up the Congo River and rattled the sugar in every teacup downtown. Ali pictured the heavy bag there, imagined Foreman's blows denting leather with the finality of iron gates slamming, and a current of dread slid cold along his spine. Honest, useful dread. He welcomed it like a sparring partner. From the hotel terrace, Howard Cosell peered through camera light, calling notes to the ABC sound crew. "Champ looks keyed, but look at that tightening of the jaw. He knows exactly how hard this mountain will be to climb," Cosell whispered, forgetting the microphone was live to a dozen midnight editors in New York. Nearby, Don King paced in serpentine circles, hair a black corona in the lamplight, chanting the purse numbers as if they were scripture. 5 million for George, 5.45 for the greatest. History printed on green paper, brothers. The small Azores cohort had followed, Joan Baez tuning her guitar beside the pool, baby Gabriel asleep in a woven sling, Iman, now assigned to Zaire's ground crew, distributing bottled Primus beer to sweating technicians, and Private Dahmer, patched up, blank-eyed, clutching a Polaroid camera he'd bought in duty-free, snapping aimless shots of palm fronds as though proof he'd really outrun the altitude. Colonel Beckwith appeared at the compound gate, civilian khakis swapped for a consultant's safari suit, lips curled. He carried a dossier marked Zairian Army Liaison. Behind him trailed G. Gordon Liddy, still appropriating authority nobody had granted, waving a hastily minted press pass. They'd embedded themselves into Mobutu's security detail. History loves strange bedfellows. Ali muttered to Angelo Dundee. "See that? Whole battalion of ghosts I didn't invite." Dundee cinched the last loop of gauze. "Ghosts don't win fights, champ. Hands do. Show 'em." Ali vaulted the ropes. The local drummers struck a new rhythm, and Konyi War beat, fast as a skipping rope. Ali mirrored it, feet a blur of shuffle, heel-toe, body angling with the fluid arrogance that made even shadowboxing feel like a televised sermon. He unleashed a jab at the humid night, another, then the corkscrew right that once rewrote Sonny Liston's face. Sweat flew, sparkling like meteor dust in the beams. At ringside, Beckwith barked to a Zairian colonel, "See how a soft nation idolizes loud men." Ali heard it, smile flicking quick as a jab. He feinted, spun, and yelled, so the floodlights seemed to amplify every syllable. "Colonel, your mouth keeps writing checks your courage forgets to cash." The gathered reporters roared, flashbulbs stuttered. Liddy jotted furiously, ink scratching like a mouse inside a coffin. But beneath the theatrics, Ali's lungs tightened. The air felt heavier than any mountain run in Deer Lake. Between rounds of footwork, he pictured Foreman's face again. Stone calm, blank eyes, the look of a man too powerful to imagine losing. Doubt flickered. He forced it down, replaced the image with the Atlantic waves punching basalt, the reminder that rocks were rocks. At the far corner, Baez began to sing, "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot," voice drifting above the drums. The melody seeped through the ring like cool water, and something gentle settled on Ali's shoulders. He thought of Malcolm's smile in Harlem, of draft boards, of every arena that had booed him, then cheered him, then needed him. All of it braided into the song until the rope of memory felt strong enough to climb. A hush cut the night. George Foreman himself, looming beside the archway, entourage in tow, Doc Broadus, Archie Moore, a half-dozen Zairian policemen. Foreman's gaze fixed on Ali's footwork with clinical disinterest, as though studying an insect under glass. No sneer, no greeting, just a nod, curt, executioner's economy. Ali's pulse spiked. He raised both gloved fists and blew Foreman a kiss, a taunt weightless as ash but designed to brand headlines. Foreman did not react. He turned and walked back into the shadows, leaving the drummers unsure how to fill the sudden void. Don King clapped like a carnival barker. "That's the shot. That's the myth in motion." Cosell leaned over the ropes. "Mohammed, he looks granite. Any second thoughts?" Ali stopped bouncing, stared into Cosell's camera. "Howard, tell America granite cracks when lightning finds the fault lines." He tapped his temple. "I'm the geologist, baby." Sweat stung his eyes, yet adrenaline sharpened every edge. Beckwith's scowl, Liddy's scribble, Baez's lullaby, Dahmer's camera flash. A tapestry of believers and doubters, all tethered to his upcoming bell. He resumed shuffle, faster, letting the night blur into rhythm. Heat, drums, heartbeat merged until only two truths remained. Foreman's fists were coming, and Ali's story was not finished. The air smelled of dust and jasmine and fear, but beneath it, Ali sensed the same Atlantic wind he'd outrun. Relentless, memory strong, testing stone. In 6 nights, under brighter lights, the world would see which broke first. Morning in Kinshasa began like a cymbal crash. Roosters, diesel horns, and the wild ululation of market women that ricocheted up the hotel's concrete facade and rattled Ali awake before dawn prayers. He rolled from the bed, calf muscles still humming from last night's footwork, and stepped onto the balcony where mist curled above the Congo River in slow, ghost-white sheaths. Somewhere out there, Foreman's camp stirred. He imagined George rising heavy-lidded, cracking eggs by the dozen, laughing at gravity each time he flexed. Inside the suite, Cosell was already dictating into a handheld tape recorder, tie flung over one shoulder. October 27th, 1974. History's tremor travels on equatorial humidity. Ali grinned, poured water over his face, and recited a quick bismillah that mingled with Cosell's nasal narration like harmony against trumpet. Downstairs, Don King had converted the lobby into a bazaar of broadcast gear and hustlers, from Japanese lens crews bartering for sockets to Mobutu's soldiers accepting bribes masquerading as transport fees. Colonel Beckwith surveyed it all with a contractor's disdain, B Company clipboard tucked under one elbow. G. Gordon Liddy stood beside him, jaw set, arms folded, as though daring anyone to ask what crimes he plotted now. When Ali emerged in tracksuit and prayer beads, a cluster of local children surrounded him, dozens barefoot, eyes bright as the sun exploding off red clay. One boy thrust out a poster of Foreman annihilating Joe Frazier. Ali knelt, took the boy's marker, and scribbled across the picture. "Still too pretty to bruise." The gaggle erupted in laughter. The boy tucked the poster under his arm like contraband fortune. Across the courtyard, Foreman's manager, Dick Sadler, appeared, carrying a clipboard of his own. He raised 2 fingers. Weigh in at noon. Ali winked, made a show of flexing his bicep, and hollered so every camera turned. "Tell Big George the scale's scared of me. Needs backup." Noon came blister hot. The weigh-in stage perched over a sea of sweating reporters outside Stadium Tata Raphael. Mobutu's portrait loomed above the bandstand, eyes stern, hat askew in permanent judgment. Ali bounded up first, robe shimmering ivory, trimmed in green Islamic script. Flashbulbs hammered. He kicked off sneakers, stepped onto the scale, and shouted, "Bring me the heavyweight math." The needle steadied at 216. Foreman followed, bare torso glistening like oiled granite, crowd murmuring as 220 flicked into place. The promoter tried for the ritual stare down. Foreman locked eyes, flat, unreadable, while Ali unleashed a torrent of stagecraft. "You so ugly even your shadow got pimples. You hit like a fridge door and move like rent due." But George only blinked once, then leaned close enough that reporters later swore they felt temperature drop. In a voice too low for microphones, he said, "Keep talking, Clay. Mouths don't block hooks." For the first time since Lisbon's dawn, Ali felt silence threaten him. It pressed around the heart like tight gloves. He barked a laugh to mask it, but Cosell saw the pulse twitch at Ali's neck and scribbled Foreman whisper, "Unsettles, champ." Back at the Intercontinental, Angelo Dundee iced Ali's knuckles while Joan Baez sang Nkosi Sikelel, I Africa, to a knot of hotel workers. Private Dahmer hovered near a potted palm, Polaroid trained on anything that moved, medication bottle half empty in his pocket. Iman glided through with towels, pausing to hand Ali a folded note. "Roof at sunset. National drummer wants to bless your hands." Sunset draped Kinshasa in molten gold. On the roof, standing drums, Ngoma, ringed a clearing. The drummer, an elder named Congo Kiesa, painted Ali's fists with red clay thumbprints, chanting in Lingala. Stone remembers every river that tried to drown it. The rhythm he beat rose and fell like a heartbeat inside a megaphone. Each thud reverberated in Ali's sternum until he felt the roof vibrate. Kiesi leaned close, eyes bright with ancestral fire. "Tomorrow night's storm will test Riverbank. Do not run from mud. Make it your rope." As darkness thickened, a power outage silenced the city, plunging the rooftop into star-flecked hush. In the sudden black, Ali heard Beckwith's boots on gravel, felt the colonel's presence before he spoke. "Clay." The voice held neither hatred nor respect now, only weary inevitability. "War's got many uniforms. Yours is talk. Mine was olive drab. Tomorrow I'm in ringside security. If Foreman don't finish you, the crowd might." Ali exhaled into the dark, fists still tacky with clay. "Colonel, every uniform ends up a rag. Only stories outlive the cloth." "Then make sure yours don't end soaked in your own blood," Beckwith replied, footsteps retreating toward the stairwell. Electricity flickered back. City lights sprang on like thousands of tiny verdicts. Far across town, searchlights swept the stadium, rehearsing their dance for tomorrow's spectacle. Ali watched until bulbs blurred, felt the weight of the clay harden into scabs over his knuckles, miniature shields forged by ritual and dust. Back in the suite, he found Dahmer asleep on the couch, Polaroids spread across his chest, children laughing, drums shaking. Foreman's stare frozen mid-glare. One photo caught Ali mid-shuffle, souls a blur. Dahmer had scrawled at the bottom, faster than fear. Ali folded it into his passport. Night deepened, and a hush settled where adrenaline had throbbed all day. Ali lay on the narrow bed, listening to the Congo River's slow murmurs like a distant crowd filling cheap seats. Every throb in his wrapped hands reminded him of Foreman's hooks, every steady breath a promise to answer them. In 6 hours he would rise for road work. In 24 he would enter the ring, and in between lived the longest round a fighter ever faces. The one fought alone against the dark, armed only with memory of every stone still standing after all the waves. The first call to prayer shivered across Kinshasa at 4 a.m., a weave of muezzin over Anglican bells, and Muhammad Ali was already pounding the Boulevard du 30 Juin in gray pre-dawn haze. Sweat darkened his tracksuit long before the sun breached the acacia trees, but behind him stretched a ragtag peloton. Street kids, vendors pushing carts, 2 gendarmes on battered mopeds, chanting the mantra that had soaked every wall in town. Ali Bomai! Ali Bomai! A company of soldiers blocked a crossroads near the presidential palace. Colonel Beckwith stood with them, sunglasses reflecting the torchlit crowd. He raised a bullhorn. "Clear the avenue! Security protocol!" The children only shouted louder. Ali slowed to a trot, winked at the colonel, then lifted both arms as if conducting an orchestra. The chant pitched higher, rolled over the soldiers like surf. Even one private, barely 17, mouthed the words before catching his own treason and snapping to attention. Beckwith lowered the bullhorn, lips thin. Back at the Intercontinental, Angelo Dundee iced Ali's knees while Howard Cosell rehearsed his opening line into a mirror. Here in equatorial darkness, history waits for the bell. And Don King alternated between cajoling transmission techs and spraying his hair to ever greater altitude. Telephones spat static. Mobutu's interior minister had ordered every line tapped, which only sharpened the promoter's buzzsaw nerves. At noon, a tropical downpour burst like ruptured drums, turning red earth to slick chocolate and knocking power out across half the capital. In the dim banquet hall now repurposed as media lounge, Joan Baez led an impromptu acoustic set to quell reporter panic. Private Dahmer crouched by a window, Polaroid clicking at sheets of rain hammering banana leaves. He peeled one photo, watched the image bloom, gray sky, a smear of lightning, and scribbled beneath it, "Storm rehearsing for Foreman." Rumor ripped through the hotel. Foreman had delayed public appearance, nursing a migraine and a secret ankle tweak. Dick Sadler dismissed it. George is granite. Yet Cosell jotted a fresh cue card. Unspoken doubts in Champions Camp. Ali eavesdropped, smirked, and whispered to Dundee, "Even granite hates water in its cracks." By late afternoon, generators rumbled to life, and Mobutu's security detail swept the stadium with Alsatian dogs and Czech-made metal detectors that shrieked at every folding chair. G. Gordon Liddy directed the sweep like a stage manager, enforcing a new order. Women and children to outer rings, foreigners in cordoned press pens, Zairian soldiers shoulder to shoulder on the aisles. Italian riggers cursed as they retightened ring ropes. Somehow they'd slackened 3 inches overnight. Dundee suspected sabotage. Beckwith swore logistics error. Ali, hearing the tale, chuckled, "Ropes getting lazy for rope-a-dope. Good omen." Sunset dissolved purple behind the cheap concrete stands, and floodlights ignited, hurling white-hot halos over the ring. Underneath, Congo Chiesa arrived with his Ngoma troupe, smearing fresh red clay on Ali's gloves. Each thumbprint left a faint crescent when it dried, so that the leather looked alive, breathing ancestral dust. "Remember," Chiesi intoned, "mud swallows thunder." At 11 p.m., they moved to the locker room. The air reeked of camphor rub and damp canvas. Don King burst in waving telexes. New York, Chicago, L.A. Pay-per-view lines jammed, theaters oversold. Sinatra reportedly betting big on Foreman. Ali laughed so hard his stool creaked. "They paying to see my funeral and getting a resurrection." Midnight. Mobutu himself strode past, leopard skin toque gleaming, entourage thick with French-tailored ministers. He paused, measured Ali with an expression equal parts monarch and bookmaker. "You give my people courage," he said flatly, then added almost a threat, "Do not disappoint." When he left, the fluorescent hum seemed louder. Dundee tightened the glove laces another notch. 1:34 a.m. Torrential rain returned, hissing on corrugated roof, but the ring, open to sky, stayed dry under 24 searchlights. Technicians fretted. King barked, "Rain sells drama, leave it." 3:02 a.m., call time. Cosell, headset askew, paced outside the dressing room door, reciting into his mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, the moment has come." Drums thundered beyond the tunnel, 30,000 throats hammering Ali Boumé until the syllables blended with the rainfall. Dundee pressed forehead to Ali's. "Remember, champ, rounds 1 through 3. Let him burn fuel. We live in his shadow until the sun comes up." Ali closed his eyes. He saw the Boeing 707 cabin, Becker's smoldering cigarette, Santa Maria's cold cargo bay, the Azorian surf punching basalt, the rooftop drums painting his fists. Each memory clicked into place like teeth on a zipper, sealing shut every doubt. He rose, shoulders loose, grin sharp enough to shave fear. Down the tunnel they walked, past mob-packed barricades, rain turning dust to steam beneath the floodlights. Joan Baez's voice drifted from somewhere unseen, soft but certain. "Swing low, sweet chariot." The melody wove through Ali's ribcage, matched his heartbeat. At the curtain he paused. Beyond, Foreman paced the ring like a caged locomotive, hood draped, eyes blazing cobalt in the lights. Ali inhaled deep, tasting copper and mango and gun oil from the soldiers' rifles. He bounced on his toes, rolled his neck, whispered a prayer to the merciful, and felt Dundee's hand tap twice on his spine. The signal. The PA crackled. Introducing, in the red corner, the challenger and former heavyweight champion of the world, Muhammad Ali. He stepped into the roar. Rain spattered his lashes. Camera flash seared white constellations across his vision. Somewhere in the deluge, Beckwith's voice barked orders. Liddy's pen scratched. Dahmer's Polaroid whined. None of it touched him. Because the ring was there, squared by ropes he'd willed to perfect slack, and in its center waited the granite mountain. Ali vaulted the apron, slipped through the ropes, clay-scarred gloves raised. He looked at Foreman and smiled, a smile forged on every wave that had failed to break stone. Foreman's eyes narrowed. The bell had not yet rung, but the fight had finally, irrevocably, begun. The bell was a shotgun in a cathedral, one brutal blast that snuffed every chant, every drum, every quick prayer still half-formed in 30,000 throats. Ali moved first, a fast, circular glide, testing the canvas slick with blown-in rain. Foreman lumbered out behind him, gloves chest high, breathing already loud enough for the ringside mics. Don King leaned so far through the ropes he nearly lost a cufflink, and Cosell's voice cracked in the headphones. "Muhammad starts on his bicycle, ladies and gentlemen, but the road tonight is short and paved with danger." Round 1 was all reconnaissance. Ali flicked jabs like match strikes, not meant to burn but to draw the map of Foreman's face. Twice he found forehead, once the tip of the nose, Then he darted sideways, shoulder brushing a droplet-spangled rope. Foreman answered with a hook that bent air. It missed by inches, yet Ali felt the gust slap his ear. Heavy bags don't hit back, he reminded himself. George's did, tonight. At ringside, Colonel Beckwith barked into a walkie, though no one heard him over the din. G. Gordon Liddy stood beside the timekeeper, stopwatch clicking, even though the official clock glowed bright. Old habits die armed. Private Dahmer gripped his Polaroid like a lifeline, tried to snap, but his hands shook too hard. The lens only captured splashes of light and blur. The bell clanged. Ali strolled to his corner, face sphinx calm. Dundee dabbed sweat, whispered, "How heavy's he feel?" Ali grinned, "Like the Atlantic leaning on my chest." Across the neutral zone, Dick Sadler fanned Foreman, whose eyes flared at the word Atlantic, as though he too tasted salt in the night air. Round 2, Ali reversed the dance. He stepped straight to Foreman and fired a lightning four-piece, last punch a chopping right that thudded off granite cheekbone. The crowd screamed, "Ali Boumé!" Rain or no rain, even the soldiers lost formation. But the exchange cost breath, and Foreman punished the temerity with an uppercut to the ribs that seemed to lift Ali half an inch before gravity reclaimed him. Cameras caught Ali's wince. King hissed, "Sell the pain, baby, sell it!" Ali clinched, whispering in Foreman's ear, "That all you got, sucker?" Foreman grunted, something lost to the roar, but the retort came with elbows and forearms, legal enough for midnight in Zaire. The referee, Zach Clayton, pried them apart as lightning spider-webbed the clouds overhead, flashbulbs from the sky. Round 3 unspooled slower. Ali let his back find the ropes, exactly the sin every trainer preached against, and rolled his torso so that Foreman's artillery glanced off arms and shoulders. Each body shot sounded like a sledge on wet lumber. Still, Ali's head stayed maddeningly out of reach, swaying inches from danger, lips mouthing a mantra Foreman could almost read. Miss, miss, miss. High in the grandstand, Joan Baez couldn't watch. She knelt, humming "We Shall Overcome." Voice drowned, but vibration felt. Congo Kaiser beat a lone drum, slower than heart rate, guiding Ali's rhythm. Beckwith shouted, "He's trapped! Finish him!" And for a moment Foreman believed the order was his own thought. He braced and unleashed a right crossfit to crack Teak. Ali ducked, rope absorbed the blow, sprung him forward, and a stinging counter-right kissed Foreman's temple. The champion blinked, more surprised than hurt, but surprise sows fatigue. By round 4, steam rose from both fighters like city sewer vents. Rain had eased to mist, yet humidity turned each breath into syrup. Cosell narrated history while it happened, voice hoarse. Ali's playing bullfighter, every pass a red cape, and the bull is snorting heavier by the minute. Foreman snapped a jab, dug a hook, another hook, thud, thud, that would have folded lesser men. Ali's guard sank an inch. He cinched another clinch, murmured, "They told me you were mean, George. Show me mean." Foreman shoved, swung an illegal chop over the shoulder. Clayton warned, but Ali winked at the ref as if to say, "Let him dig his grave one foul at a time." Round 5, the crowd's chant fractured into nervous shards. They sensed the pattern, but not the endgame. Liddy clicked his stopwatch, saw Foreman throwing 30 punches to Ali's 12, scribbled volume versus velocity. Baez opened her guitar case and, though forbidden, strummed a single chord that circled the stadium like ghosted thunder. Ali's legs, sore from the airport tarmac and rooftop drills, started to feel every coil of rope, but his mind stayed ice. Wave meets rock, he thought, but I'm the tide deciding when to leave. He pivoted off ropes, stole center ring for 10 seconds, flickered combinations to Foreman's eyes, glove leather producing tiny cuts that bled just enough to blur. Between round 6 and 7, Dundee pressed the cold sponge to Ali's neck. 2 more laps of rope, then we drive. Ali nodded, lips blue-tinged from gulping night air. Across the canvas, Sadler massaged Foreman's shoulders, voice urgent. He's lying on ropes. Smash the body and he'll fold. Foreman's chest heaved like a forge bellows. For the first time, sweat dripped from his lash line, stinging cuts his gloves had never known. Round 7 opened with Foreman sprinting. Yes, sprinting, corner to corner, launching a barrage meant to erase narratives. Ali shelled up, ribs singing, but inside the guard he grinned. The younger man's strides were half-steps slow now. At the 2-minute mark, Ali uncoiled a surprise lead right that crashed against Foreman's jaw, sweat spraying phosphorescent under the arcs. Gasps rippled. Even Beckwith's bullhorn lowered, mute. Foreman answered by mauling Ali into a corner, but the punches lost snap. When the bell clanged, the champion trudged to his stool, arms sagging, eyes suddenly searching for oxygen. Sadler slapped his cheeks, blew ammonia under his nose. Foreman frowned as though betrayed by his own lungs. In the opposite corner, Ali inhaled the ammonia drifting across, felt it lance the sinuses, clarity sharper than any sermon. Dundee whispered, "This is the ocean floor, champ. Push off." Ali looked at the crowd. King praying to Prophet, Cosell mouthing, "Oh my God," Dahmer finally clicking a perfect frame, Baez clasping her child. He tasted every mile from Louisville to the Azores to here, and found the wait delicious. Round 8. The night, the rain, the drums, the decades, everything funneled into 3 minutes. Foreman waded in, arms heavy as anchor chain, still dangerous. Ali snapped a jab, another, then slid back to the ropes, bait too shiny for tired eyes. Foreman bit, unleashed 4 wild hooks. Ali rolled with each, felt cord bite his spine, then saw the opening bloom like dawn. Foreman's chin, unguarded, tilted millimeters. Ali pivoted left foot, torqued hips, and hurled the short right cross that men would replay until videotape wore thin. Crack! Foreman's head snapped east-west, his knees dipped. Ali, already balanced, lifted a left hook, smack, then pressed forward with one last right that traveled 6 inches and landed with the thud of a gavel ending an era. Foreman's arms reached for ropes that weren't there. His body spun almost gracefully, crashing to canvas face first at Dundee's feet. The stadium became vacuum, noise sucked out in awe, then exploded in volcanic ALI Bomay. Cosell screamed without words, microphone picking up only static and heartbeat drums. Clayton counted. 1, 2, 3. Foreman's gloves twitched like stranded fish, but his legs would not obey. At 7, he was on one knee, eyes blinking rain and blood. At 8, he tried to rise, hips lagging. At 9, he fell again, chest heaving, and the referee's hand sliced the midnight air. 10. Yet Ali did not leap. He did not pogo or sprint the perimeter. He stood above the fallen mountain, chest billowing once, twice, then raised fists skyward, one still smeared with Ngoma clay, now streaked by sweat. Saluting every wave that had lashed stone before this moment, thunder rolled beyond the stadium, as if the Atlantic itself applauded, and Ali whispered into the commotion, unheard but etched into history, "Rocks, remember!" The scoreboard lights still flickered 8, 9, 10 long after the referee's wave had emptied George Foreman's eyes of conquest. But the night did not release its grip on the ring. Instead, it swallowed both fighters in a rush of flashbulbs and steam, rain finally giving way to a warm, metallic mist that smelled of soldered myths. Ali offered Foreman a hand, and the younger man, dazed yet lucid enough to recognize the magnitude of mercy, clasped it. Their gloves, one smudged by red-brown Ngoma clay, the other by canvas grime, locked like 2 continents closing a fault line. No words passed. Exhaustion is a truce deeper than apology. Gendarmes carved a shaky corridor through the delirious crowd. Don King hurled his leopard-trimmed overcoat over Ali's shoulders, but the champ shrugged it off, waving the fabric like a matador cape so the fans in the cheap stands could see the sweat-luminous torso that had withheld an empire. Colonel Beckwith shoved through on the opposite flank, pistol still holstered but unfastened. He stared at Ali with a face that didn't know whether to salute or spit. Ali grinned, leaned close enough that sweat dripped onto Beckwith's lapel and murmured, "Colonel, I'm still too pretty for your funeral. You can stand down." Beckwith's reply died under the roar of Ali Bomé, echoing off corrugated roofs clear to the Congo River. In the tunnel, Joan Baez cradled her guitar like an infant, voice trembling as she pressed out, "Glory, glory, hallelujah." Private Dahmer, eyes wide as stadium lamps, snapped a Polaroid of Ali mid-stride. The flash painted halos around each raindrop. When the image developed seconds later, it showed only a blur of white trunks and a pair of fists, as if speed itself had refused to sit for the portrait. Dahmer laughed, an unhinged, relieved sound, then tore the photo in half and let the pieces fall like confetti, war memories scattering with them. Inside the locker room, Foreman sat on a folding chair, ice pack balanced like fragile porcelain against the swell of his left cheek. Dick Sadler paced, mumbling about rematches and renegotiated purse splits. But George raised a palm, silencing future commerce. He looked across at Ali, whose hands were being unlaced by Dundee, and said, "You were right. Mouth can block hooks, if it's smart enough." Ali dipped his head, half bow, half nod. "Brains ride behind the jab, big man. Keep driving, you'll get there." No one scribbled that quote. Reporters were still chasing Cosell through the hallway, trying to pry adjectives from a man who'd apparently run out of them. Mobutu materialized in a cloud of French cologne, metals clacking like poker chips. He extended both arms, trying to enfold Ali in a statesman's embrace, but found himself merely patting damp triceps. Ali was already turning to the ring doctor, asking after Foreman's blood pressure. The president's smile thinned. He pivoted instead toward cameras, declaring victory for Zaire's indomitable spirit. Meanwhile, Howard Cosell finally burst through the door, tie soaked, hair deserting its part. "Muhammad," he rasped, red light on his microphone already blinking live. "What do you call that eighth-round alchemy?" Ali slid an arm around Cosell's shoulders and spoke into the lens with a grin bright enough to relight Kinshasa if the generators failed again. "Howard, I call it remembering who I am when the world forgets." Minutes later, they spilled back into night air, thick with diesel and dust. A battered Peugeot taxi waited, an absurd chariot for the newly crowned, but Ali waved it away, opting to walk the quarter-mile to the hotel through avenues jammed with dancers, drummers, vendors hawking fried plantain. The crowd parted, then reclosed like water, carrying him along atop shoulders, an unsteady tide. Somewhere in the press, Joan Baez found a mailbox and slipped in a half-soggy postcard addressed to Greenwich Village. He did it with clay on his fists and thunder in his grin. "Wish you were here." G. Gordon Liddy shadowed the procession, jotting code words into a pocket notebook. Icon, uprising, unarmed control, as if the night's joy might be evidence of sedition. When Ali caught him scribbling, he laughed, snatched the notebook, tore out a blank sheet, and signed it. Muhammad Ali, property of the people. He handed the page back. "File that under miracles, Mr. Watergate." Liddy, for once, had no theatrical retort. At the hotel bar, Iman poured Primus into mismatched glasses. Angelo Dundee toasted the ring ropes, held like new sinew, while King negotiated global rebroadcast rights between sips. Ali drifted to the terrace, barefoot, swollen-knuckled, heartbeat finally settling into post-battle hush. The Congo River rolled below, black satin streaked with moonglaze. He thought of the Boeing 707 ceiling, pressing down in those first hours of humiliation, of Santa Maria's mold-cold concrete, of the children's chant pounding red clay alleys at dawn. All of it lay behind him now, but none of it was gone. Victories are only mosaics of every bruise endured. Footsteps approached, Foreman, limping slightly, carrying 2 bottles of mineral water. He offered one. They clinked glass, no words, and stared over the railing where the city's neon shimmered on the river like fractured constellations. Foreman finally spoke, voice hoarse. "I've been the hammer so long I forgot iron can break too." Ali nodded. "Iron breaks, water remembers." They drank, and the silence that followed was an honest one, unfit for headlines, exactly the size of respect. Somewhere inside, Baez struck the opening chord of The Boxer, and Cosell began a fresh monologue for an unseen audience. But on the terrace, only the singers of night insects persisted. Ali flexed fingers still tacky with faded clay prints, and knew the stains would outlast the swelling. Beyond the low roofs and banyan shadows, dawn inched upward, pale and unfinished, promising nothing but another round for anyone awake enough to answer the bell.